I'm not suggesting Queen Camilla lacks authority, but that tiara isn't hers. It rightfully belongs to Catherine, the Princess of Wales, for the Christmas gala at Buckingham.
Catherine entered the meeting expecting restraint, routine, and careful questions about pieces preserved from another royal generation. Instead, one sentence broke through every layer of composure she had brought with her. The jewelers had finished tracing the Queen Mother's pearl, set through surviving records, annotations, and an overlooked family instruction. The conclusion was clear. The pearls were not destined for the Queen, nor for Catherine, nor for a general royal collection. They belonged in Charlotte's future. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Catherine sat beside William as two senior jewelers placed their findings before them. The discussion had begun quietly, almost clinically, but the purpose carried enormous weight: to determine whether the necklace, earrings, and matching pieces were private family property or part of the crown collection, meaning jewelry preserved for institutional royal use, rather than personal inheritance. Old inventory records had finally been compared against a family instruction that had escaped attention for years. Then one jeweler said the words Kate had not prepared to hear. Princess Charlotte was the future owner. Kate did not answer. Her hand moved to the edge of the table, fingers tightening as if she needed something solid beneath them. She asked the jeweler to repeat the name. Charlotte. The second time hurt more. Tears came before Catherine could stop them, not because of the value of the pearls, but because her daughter had suddenly been linked to women she would never meet, women whose choices still reached into her life. William shifted his chair closer. He said nothing. The prince understood that this was pride and grief arriving together. William asked how long the instruction had existed. The jeweler opened the record again and explained that Charlotte's connection had not been added recently. The trail appeared to run back years through family papers, which meant someone within the household had understood the likely destination long before this meeting. Catherine looked up immediately. Her tears slowed, but her expression hardened. Why, she asked, had neither parent been told? The question changed everything. William turned toward the documents because the discovery was no longer simply sentimental. Someone had known. Someone had allowed the matter to remain buried. The surviving record pointed toward an older dispute involving Charles and Anne over whether historically important jewels should remain under institutional control or follow private family intention. Catherine wiped her face and listened as that hidden argument began to surface. Charlotte's name had brought her to tears, but the paperwork was about to reveal why those pearls had been kept in silence for so long. For Catherine, the discovery stopped being about jewelry almost immediately. It became about Charlotte. Her daughter had grown up surrounded by history, ceremony, expectations, and rules most children would never have to think about. Yet Kate had always tried to protect something ordinary inside that extraordinary life. Now a pearl set from another royal generation had crossed that boundary. It carried beauty, memory, and prestige. But to Catherine, it also carried weight. Kate knew exactly why that troubled her. Princess Charlotte was not simply William and Catherine's daughter. She occupied a significant place in the direct royal line, the family order that determines who stands closest to the throne. That position brought public attention long before Charlotte was old enough to understand why strangers watched her gestures, clothes, expressions, and appearances. William and Kate had spent years trying to make sure duty did not swallow childhood. The pearls threatened to make history feel personal, much sooner than either parent had expected. Catherine turned to William and told him what frightened her most. She did not want Charlotte to grow up believing that inheriting the Queen Mother's pearls meant inheriting a role she had never chosen. The Queen Mother had become a symbol of endurance through enormous upheaval, and the jewelry connected Charlotte to that legacy. But Kate wanted her daughter to learn from history, not feel trapped by it. William listened without interrupting because he understood the difference. William finally told her they did not have to explain everything now. Charlotte was still young. There would be time. Kate agreed, yet her voice tightened when she admitted the question would come one day. Why these pearls? Why her? The prince had no simple answer, so he returned to the papers, hoping the records might provide one. Then something changed. William noticed that Charlotte's name was treated differently from the broader royal household throughout the documentation. The wording did not describe the pearls as jewelry available for general royal use. It separated her personally. That distinction suggested someone had deliberately tried to protect the inheritance from being absorbed into institutional control. William read the line again. Kate leaned closer. Neither spoke for several seconds. Catherine then saw another name. Princess Anne appeared beside an older verification note. The Princess Royal, the title traditionally given to the monarch's eldest daughter, had apparently reviewed part of the record years earlier. Kate immediately asked what Anne had known. William hesitated. He knew that question could reopen an old argument involving private ownership, royal duty, and who had the right to decide the future of family possessions. Catherine did not back away. If Anne had protected Charlotte's name, she wanted to know why. And to understand that, they would have to return to the moment when Anne first realized someone was trying to treat those pearls very differently. Years before Catherine cried over Charlotte's inheritance, Princess Anne had already faced the decision that would determine whether the claim survived at all. No cameras recorded it, no statement followed. The argument unfolded quietly, around an old ledger and a set of pearls that seemed easier to classify than to question. Yet Anne understood something others did not. Once the record changed, the original intention behind those jewels could disappear with it. Anne had joined an internal review of family possessions, because several historic pieces no longer sat neatly inside one category. Some royal jewelry belonged privately to individuals, while other pieces were connected to the crown, meaning they were preserved for official or institutional use, rather than treated as ordinary personal inheritance. The Queen Mother's pearl set had become especially difficult because generations had handled it without publicly defining its final destination. That uncertainty made the paperwork dangerous. Anne noticed the problem before anyone expected her to. Princess Anne watched an aide prepare to place the pearls under a broad category of royal jewelry during a private inventory meeting at Windsor. The Princess Royal, the title traditionally given to the monarch's eldest daughter, immediately leaned toward the ledger. A handwritten reference did not describe the set as permanently institutional. Instead, it pointed toward a future female descendant in William's family line. Anne pulled the book back across the table and asked why that notation was being ignored. Charles answered carefully. He believed historically important pieces should remain available to the monarchy whenever possible. The king argued that preserving access protected continuity and prevented significant objects from becoming scattered through private inheritance. Anne understood the logic, but she refused to accept convenience as evidence. If the original family intention pointed elsewhere, she said, the institution had no right to erase it simply because another arrangement seemed easier. Anne closed the ledger. The sound ended the debate for several seconds. She placed one hand firmly over the cover and told Charles that nothing would be altered until the ownership chain had been verified from beginning to end. He looked at his sister and understood immediately that she would not move. Anne had spent a lifetime defending duty, but for her, duty also meant protecting promises made before the people in that room held authority. Charles finally agreed to pause the reclassification. Yet one mystery remained. The old wording did not directly name Charlotte because the child had not yet become the obvious qualifying descendant when the instruction was first written. It simply referred to the future granddaughter descending through William's line. Anne preserved that sentence. Years later, the jewelers would determine that the wording had become specific enough to identify Charlotte beyond serious doubt. What Anne saved from disappearing was now the very evidence Catherine and William were holding. And that discovery would soon force them to confront the person who still believed the pearls should never have become Charlotte's private inheritance. The Catherine rarely walked into a family conversation expecting a fight. This time, she almost welcomed one. The tears were gone, but the hurt had hardened into something sharper. Charlotte's name had existed inside royal records, while her own parents remained outside the truth. By the time Kate sat opposite Charles with William beside her, the pearls were no longer the real issue. The silence was. Catherine asked the question immediately. Why had they not been told? Charles knew there was no easy answer. He explained that the records had remained incomplete for years, and that no one could be certain whether the old instruction carried enough weight to create a binding personal inheritance. The king, the reigning monarch who holds the highest position within the royal family, said he had feared giving Charlotte an expectation that specialists might later overturn. Kate listened, But the explanation did not calm her. She reminded Charles that this was not a distant ceremonial issue. It concerned her daughter. Catherine said she and William did not need a guarantee years ago. They needed honesty about the possibility. The future king remained quiet at first, watching his father choose each word, while his wife struggled to keep frustration from overtaking the conversation. Charles removed his glasses and placed them beside the file. He said he had been trying to protect Charlotte from uncertainty and from the attention that would follow if her name became connected to such famous jewelry too early. Catherine answered almost instantly. Keeping the possibility from her parents had not protected the child, she said. It had simply moved control of the decision away from the two people responsible for raising her. William finally spoke. The prince told Charles that once Charlotte became a realistic match for the wording in the record, he and Catherine should have been brought into the discussion. His tone stayed controlled, but the message was unmistakable. William understood his father's fear of creating another public fascination around the girl. He did not accept that fear as a reason for excluding them. Charles looked down at the file before making the admission that changed the room again. Princess Anne had pushed for the matter to be settled much earlier. The king said his sister had repeatedly warned that waiting would only make the eventual discovery more painful. He had resisted because Charlotte was young, and because the pearls carried enough history to turn a child into a symbol before she understood what that meant. Catherine understood the fear. She still did not forgive the secrecy. Then Charles added one more detail. Someone else inside the household had argued that the pearl set should never become Charlotte's private property at all. William leaned forward. Kate stopped moving. The argument was no longer about old wording. It was about power, ownership, and who believed they still had the right to override a promise made long before Charlotte was born. The palace could survive anger. It could survive disagreement. What it could not ignore was ownership. Once the jewelers confirmed Charlotte's claim, the family was forced into a harder question than anyone wanted to answer. Who actually had the power to decide what happened next? Charles was sovereign. William was the child's father. Catherine was her mother. Anne had protected the record. Yet none of them could simply erase what the surviving documents now appeared to say. Charles listened as the specialists explained the distinction again. Historic jewelry could be worn at state occasions without belonging permanently to the institution. Ceremonial use meant an item might appear during official royal duties, while private ownership meant the object legally remained with an individual or family line. The pearl set, they said, fell much closer to personal inheritance. That mattered because even the king could not simply redirect private family property for convenience. Charles said very little after the meeting ended. He remained with Anne while the others left, reopened the conclusion, and read the wording one final time. The king controlled ceremonies, households, appointments, and enormous parts of royal tradition, but this decision had been made before his authority could touch it. His frustration was not really aimed at Charlotte. It came from realizing that generations before him had already placed limits around what he could change. Anne understood exactly what bothered him. She told Charles that the family could not defend tradition only when tradition strengthened the institution. If an earlier generation had deliberately chosen personal inheritance, then respecting that choice was also part of royal duty. Her brother looked at her without answering. The princess had spent years protecting the record for precisely this moment, and she was not about to soften now. Then the source of the earlier resistance finally became clear. Charles explained that several advisors had supported moving the pearls into a central royal collection. Their argument was practical. Historically important jewelry should remain available to future monarchs, rather than pass through private inheritance, where control could become uncertain. Anne rejected that logic for the same reason she had years earlier. Practicality could not replace intention. Catherine changed the entire argument. Kate did not ask for the pearls to be handed over immediately. Instead, she requested that the set remain securely held until Charlotte was older, while the records formally recognized her daughter as the future owner. William backed her at once. The compromise protected the jewels without erasing Charlotte's claim. Charles looked at Catherine differently after that. She had not demanded victory. She had demanded clarity. And once Charlotte's name was formally entered into the record, the family would lose the one thing it had relied on for years: the ability to keep the decision quietly unsettled. No trumpet announced it. No ceremony marked the moment. A pen touched paper. A signature was added. And one of the most emotional disputes inside the family suddenly became real. Charlotte would not wear the pearls tomorrow. She might not even touch them for years. But from that moment onward, everyone in the room understood the same thing. The Queen Mother's pearl set had a future owner, and nobody could quietly change that again. William read the revised inventory before anything was signed. The document formally recorded where significant family possessions were held and who was entitled to them. This version stated that the pearls would remain securely protected on behalf of Princess Charlotte until her parents believed she was old enough to take personal responsibility for them. The prince agreed immediately. He wanted the inheritance recognized, but he refused to let it become part of his daughter's public identity while she was still a child. Catherine held the pen longer than anyone expected. She looked toward William, took a slow breath, and finally signed the acknowledgement as Charlotte's mother. Kate remembered the first meeting, the shock, and the tears that had come when the jeweler spoke her daughter's name. This time, she stayed composed. The emotion was still there, but it had changed. What once felt like a burden now felt like something she could protect. Charles watched her carefully. The king no longer seemed focused on control. He told Catherine that Charlotte should eventually hear the entire story, including the uncertainty, the arguments, and the years of hesitation. Kate answered that she agreed, but only when the story could teach her daughter something rather than frighten her. Charles gave a small nod. For once, there was no argument between them. Anne then placed something beside Catherine. Princess Anne had kept a copy of the old notation she protected during the earlier inventory dispute. The Princess Royal showed Kate the line that had nearly been absorbed into a broader classification years before. Catherine read it twice. The meaning was unmistakable now. One decision at one meeting had preserved the evidence that eventually protected Charlotte's inheritance. William understood how close they had come to never seeing it. The family agreed on one final condition. Charlotte would not be told yet. Her childhood would remain separate from the weight of the pearls for as long as possible. But secrecy carried its own burden. That evening, Catherine found herself alone with her daughter. She had spent days deciding what Charlotte should not know. Then the girl asked one simple question. And suddenly Kate had to decide how much truth a mother could hide from the child at the center of everything. After days of documents, arguments, and guarded decisions, the most important conversation contained none of them. There was no king in the room, no jeweler, no advisor, only Catherine and Charlotte. Kate had spent the day trying to protect her daughter from the weight of history. Yet sitting beside her now, she suddenly wondered whether children understood more than adults expected. Then Charlotte asked why her mother had been crying. Catherine felt the question land harder than anything she had heard in the meetings. She had worked carefully to keep the inheritance separate from Charlotte's ordinary life, because she did not want an old pearl set to change the way her daughter saw herself. The jewels carried history, but history could become pressure when placed on a child too soon. Kate wanted Charlotte to grow before she was asked to carry stories created generations before her birth. Charlotte asked again whether something bad had happened. Catherine shook her head. She could not explain the full truth, but she refused to dismiss the concern either. Kate told her daughter that she had learned something important about their family, something that made her realize how quickly Charlotte was growing up. The girl listened quietly, studying her mother rather than demanding an answer. Then Charlotte reached for Catherine's hand. The gesture almost broke Kate's composure again. Charlotte told her not to worry because everything would be all right. Catherine had spent days trying to protect the girl from an inheritance she believed might become a burden, yet now the child she was protecting was comforting her instead. For one brief moment, the pearls disappeared from Kate's mind completely. Catherine chose her words carefully. She told Charlotte that family objects only mattered because of the people and memories connected to them. A necklace was only a necklace until someone remembered who wore it, who protected it, and why it was passed down. Kate added that one day there would be certain family stories Charlotte would be trusted to carry, but she would never have to become someone else, simply because those stories belonged to her. Charlotte accepted the answer without pressing further. Catherine finally understood what had changed. The pearls no longer felt like a command from the past. Properly handled, they could become something gentler, a connection between women, generations, memory, and affection. The inheritance did not have to define Charlotte. It could simply remind her where part of her story began. William later listened as Kate described the conversation. The prince understood immediately that one decision still remained. They could keep Charlotte's connection to the Queen Mother completely private. Or they could acknowledge it before someone else did. And before that choice could be made, the secret escaped. By morning, the secret had escaped the walls that contained it. Charlotte's name was suddenly everywhere. Commentators who had spent years arguing over royal titles and succession were now talking about a necklace, a young girl, and a connection stretching backward through generations. Yet Catherine was not shaken by the scale of the attention. What caught her off guard was the emotion. People were not talking about price. They were talking about memory. Catherine learned that specialist examination of the Queen Mother's jewelry records had become public knowledge. The documents had established Princess Charlotte as the future owner of the historic pearl set, and the palace moved quickly to control the meaning of that announcement. A private inheritance, officials stressed, meant property intended for an individual, rather than jewelry held permanently for official royal use. The pearls would remain securely stored while Charlotte was young. Nothing about her daily life would change. Then the headline appeared. One major morning newspaper ran the words "Pearls for Charlotte" across its front page. Beneath it, the story described the inheritance not as a transfer of wealth, but as an emotional bridge between an older royal generation and one of its youngest members. The framing spread quickly. Broadcasters repeated the same theme. For once, the conversation was less about privilege and more about what families choose to preserve. Catherine placed the newspaper on the breakfast table and stared at it longer than William expected. The prince finally asked whether she regretted allowing the confirmation to stand. Kate shook her head. She did not regret the truth. She only wished people could understand why she had cried when she first heard Charlotte's name. William understood immediately. Those tears had never been about pearls. They had been about suddenly feeling generations collapse into one moment. Outside Windsor, the reaction became even more personal. Visitors began leaving small handwritten messages for Charlotte, and several mentioned necklaces, rings, or earrings passed down from their own mothers and grandmothers. One note simply wished the young princess the chance to understand the woman behind every object she inherited. Catherine heard about those messages and felt something inside her loosen. The story had escaped palace control, but it had not become the spectacle she feared. The public seemed to understand the pearls as a family heirloom before they understood them as royal property. That distinction mattered deeply to Kate. William saw the relief in her face. Charles heard about the reaction. Anne did too. The country had already decided what the inheritance represented. Now the family had one final task, deciding what Charlotte herself should someday be told about the women, promises, arguments, and love carried inside those pearls. In the end, the argument that began with ownership did not finish with ownership. Catherine's tears had exposed something far more important than the destination of a necklace. Charles had confronted the limits of royal authority. Anne had watched an old decision she protected finally survive. William had defended his daughter without turning her inheritance into spectacle. And Charlotte, still largely unaware of what had unfolded around her, had become the quiet center of a story spanning generations. Catherine finally understood what the pearls meant. The Queen Mother's set was now formally recognized as Princess Charlotte's future personal inheritance, with the jewelry remaining securely held while she was still young. A personal inheritance meant the pieces belonged to Charlotte rather than to the monarchy as a general institution. The destination was settled. No advisor, future review, or convenient reclassification could quietly erase that truth. Charles accepted that reality in a way he had resisted before. In a private conversation with William, the king admitted that Charlotte's parents should have been involved earlier. He had believed delay would protect the girl from expectation, but he now understood why silence had created its own damage. William did not prolong the argument. The prince simply told his father that what mattered now was that the family had honored the original intention. Anne found Catherine afterward. Kate thanked Princess Anne for refusing to let the record disappear during that old inventory dispute. The Princess Royal, the title traditionally held by the monarch's eldest daughter, answered with characteristic simplicity. Objects could be replaced, she said. Promises between generations could not. Catherine carried those words with her because they explained the entire battle better than any legal document ever could. Kate also finally understood her own tears. She had not broken down because Charlotte had inherited something valuable. She had cried because one name had suddenly connected her daughter to women who had lived, endured, loved, and carried responsibility long before Charlotte existed. For one overwhelming moment, history had stopped feeling distant. It had become personal. William understood the same lesson. Charles did too. Anne had understood it from the beginning, and Charlotte would understand it one day. The pearls were not a crown. They were not a command. They did not decide who Charlotte must become or what role she must play. They were simply a connection to family, memory, responsibility, and the women whose lives came before hers. That became the final verdict. The monarchy had preserved more than jewelry. It had honored a promise. And Catherine had preserved something even greater for her daughter: the freedom to carry history without allowing history to control her. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.